hey, go out and find us deals. And a lot of these funds give the deal generation work to inexperienced professionals in the space, right? The younger guys on the totem pole. The funds that put a bigger focus on generation are the ones that are not only seeing more deals, but they're closing more deals and they're finding more proprietary deals. Somebody that's been incredibly influential on our model and how we operate is a guy, Alex Hormozy. So we generate deals in two ways.
Joining us today is Brian Scanlon, Managing Partner at Deal Gen Partners, a deal generation service for private equity firms. Brian, if you could give us a 60 to 90 second breakdown of you, please.
Sure. So I got pretty lucky after college. I started a business in college and was lucky enough to sell it. Not, life-changing money, but enough to be able to do what I wanted. Went into the sell side of the M&A world with the group that helped me sell that company. And then after a couple of years of that, I started to think what we did at my company was lead generation. And then how can we apply that better to the private equity world? So I took a step back from working on the sell side and launched Deal Gen to operate more for the buyers, for the private equity funds and strategics. And right now, what we do is we source investment and acquisition opportunities for private equity funds and strategic acquirers, some family offices. So the evolution was really selling a business, getting into the sell side, and then saying, hey, we can really find a lot of deals. If we were working with the buyers, we could probably close more transactions with a smaller team than if we were sell side, boutique M&A investment shop. So that's where we are now. And right now we're working with, over 120 different private equity funds to originate transactions for them.
Excellent. So what's one mistake that you see private equity firms making, and what actions would you suggest to correct them?
Yeah, I think, I'll speak to the origination part because that's what we know the best. So the natural kind of, progression of a professional in the private equity world is you start off, at that analyst level and they say, hey, go out and find us deals. And a lot of these funds give the deal generation work to inexperienced professionals in the space, right? The younger guys on the totem pole. And we see that the funds that put a bigger focus on generation are the ones that are not only seeing more deals, but they're closing more deals and they're finding more proprietary deals. So I think one thing we would, kind of switch up and a reason why we're successful is every guy on our team has sold a company, right? All 9 of us have been through an exit. And it gives us a little bit of a different approach when we speak to companies, some founders, entrepreneurs, owners. We resonate a little better. So I think these funds, the lifeblood of all M&A is deal flow. And you're giving that most important piece essentially to the lowest rung on the ladder of who's in your company. And yeah, they do a great job, but we talk to some of the biggest funds in the world. And, if one of those analysts brings a deal forward in 3 years that goes pretty far down the line, they matriculate up the ladder and we're generating 130 to 160 deals a month. So I think a lot of these funds need to not rethink the effort you put into deal origination, but finding them is just as important as closing them, and with that, a lot of these leaner teams tend to turn off the origination piece when they start focusing on closing the business, right? And that pause in deal flow, it's a tough thing to turn on and off. You really have to have a steady flow of deals in order to be really successful with this, because we all know how quickly deals can, die overnight. And if you turn off the faucet, it's hard to get that thing back on in an efficient way.
And so a new role that we've seen come into private equity firms has been that BD, head of BD, partner BD, associate BD, whatever seniority they bring people in at. Are you an advocate of that position and kind of separating that from what I regard as the typical due diligence of the deal team and having one person being a master of everything from origination through to close, portfolio management, and exit?
Absolutely. I mean, we took a page out of that playbook and we actually have someone in charge of, sponsor coverage here, right? So they're constantly talking to our private equity funds about what else are you looking for? What deals have you closed recently? Are you looking for bolt-ons? And I think inside a PE fund, most of that BD is done probably with investment banks, not as much with proprietary deal flow. And the groups we see that kind of bifurcate that and say, hey, somebody's going to be in charge of focusing on proprietary, and somebody's going to be in charge of that sponsor coverage or banker coverage, going to sources of multiple deals with, big, low to mid-market investment banks. They're really successful. So I love it. I believe in it to the point where, we adopted that here and said, hey, we have to have somebody full-time just worried about the relationship with our funds, not strictly sourcing deals.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick mention of our long-standing partnership with Grata. As you will probably know, the private equity scene is constantly evolving, and deal flow is moving now to proprietary and data-driven processes. Grata provides you with the data and information of over 7 million private companies. So if you're looking to improve your proprietary deal flow and improve the data access, then reach out to Grata today. Now back to the podcast. You mentioned about the deal flow, deal origination efforts. What, if you're happy to share them, what are some of the things that you do as a full service at that level that you would recommend private equity firms start doing as well, of those steps to originate deals? Because let's imagine I'm a typical PE firm. Proprietary deal flows are the purple squirrel, and most of my work comes through intermediaries of investment banks.
Right. So we generate deals in two ways. We have a proprietary tech stack that we've built that allows us to target proprietary companies and get in touch with them in a very efficient way, a very customized way, but also in a mass automated way, which allows us to increase the capacity. I mean, if you compare us to a typical, deal origination professional on a private equity team, we're 10xing their output, their performance, because of the sheer volume we can go out to that tech with. So our tech has developed so many relationships that our inbound, and we're halfway through 2022, started matching up to our outbound, right? So we're getting just as much deal flow in now as we are originating it cold to proprietary companies. And a lot of that inbound is from bankers. We do about 40% banker-led deals, 60% proprietary deals. So our kind of bread and butter is that proprietary deal. But that's how we do it. We have the technology component that enables us to reach the masses in a highly customized way, in an automated way. I've never sat here and typed out an email to a company, hunting and pecking. But I wake up and my inbox is full with, hey, I would love to talk to you guys about exploring the market. So that tech piece is a major factor for us. I think some private equity funds have tried something similar, but the beauty of what we do is when we reach out to the market, we reach out as DealGen with, billions and billions of dollars in dry powder behind us to make acquisitions. And that entices business owners maybe a little bit more than if you reach out as a fund directly. Right? If I'm private equity fund X and I reach out to an owner and they've never heard of that fund, or a friend of theirs said, I talked to those guys and we don't like them. You remove all preconceived notions when you reach out as a conglomerate of potential acquirers. And I think that's a definite advantage, that the sum of the parts is, the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts for what we do.
Makes sense. And I suppose if we think a lot about deal generation, we think a lot about bringing in opportunities. But I suppose what's maybe not talked about and considered is the actual mindset of a founder and owner of a company that may or may not want to be acquired. What do you tend to find is the mindset of these individuals? And when I say that, are they tentative to private equity? Is their approach maybe not great that private equity's made in the past? And how do they feel about that engagement and selling their business and et cetera?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, we kind of see, depending on the industry, kind of, depends on how versed that owner is in what a transaction would look like, right? So when we go more towards manufacturing, logistics, more blue collar type of businesses, typically those are business owners that have been building something for 20, 30 years. This is their one shot. They're looking to exit. They have a different notion of what a transaction would look like than the startup tech founder who's building something with the intention of selling, right? So the hat they're wearing starts them off with some kind of opinion on the private equity world. And usually we see owners go through kind of a progression of, all right, I'm thinking about selling. Let me talk to some friends and see what they sold for. What did the transaction look like? But that's not applicable to your business. Everybody's business is a little different, right? So you have 30% of the right information there. And then some people say, well, let me go out and hire a valuation firm and see what they think I'm worth. That's great. They're probably going to be within the ballpark, a standard deviation one way or the other of what you're really worth, but it's not feedback from the people that are going to write you the check to acquire your company, which is the most useful feedback. So then they go hire an investment banker to take them to market with little to no real feedback from actual buyers. So where we come in is we're able to take that seller, summarize his company or her company quickly, present it to dozens of potential private equity acquirers, and come back to them with feedback at no cost to them because our buyers are engaged to us. And we're able to coach them through the process because, one, we're not dipping into their pockets, and two, we're truly on their team, even though the funds are, our clients at the end of the day, because we're incentivized to get them the highest value. So the mindset is usually a little bit hesitant. And the biggest challenge we see, and of course everybody sees in this world, is founder expectations versus true valuations from fund, right? And you can think you're worth 10 times your bottom line, but if they're only willing to pay you 3, you're worth 3. And that's really the hardest thing to get through to owners. But the way we do it is we set that stage before they ever have to commit to anything. So we kind of alleviate their stress and their pain and give them the education they need to make an educated decision on the biggest decision they've made as a business owner to date.
What's some of the questions that you get asked? Because before I position this, I'm a big believer in playbooks. I'm a big believer in processes and systems. And when you look at origination, that's exactly the same. It's a playbook that you can run. Clearly, you're generating a lot of opportunities via it. But I'm thinking when that outreach comes to owners and founders, there's an expectation that it's a bit like me as a recruiter. The candidate's going to know what I'm going to say. It's going to happen. But there's people that never spoke to an executive search firm, and we still get the questions of, do you charge us as a candidate? And the answer is obviously no. What are some of the questions that you get asked from founders and owners that you think that could be included in maybe not the outreach, but maybe the secondary type conversations, or what do founders and owners want to know that they maybe don't ask because it's a private equity firm and they feel stupid? What's some of those questions that you get?
Yeah, I think one thing, we get is the first thing everybody wants to know is, well, what are they going to pay for? Right? It's like, well, we have to dig in order to do that. But if you put their hat on, they don't make money the day they buy you. They make money the day they sell you. Right? So a lot of founders are hesitant to, they're not going to pay me what I'm worth, or, private equity is going to try to manipulate the transaction and suck my profits and all that. You got to put yourself in their shoes. They get nothing out of, burning your company to the ground and selling it for parts. They only get money when they grow this thing and sell it for more than they bought you for. So I think a lot of founders, ask us, what does a transaction look like? What does a structure look like? And we try to get ahead of that, letting them know, hey, let's say you have a customer concentration issue, right? The deal is going to be structured differently because of that, because there's a higher risk that if you lose a 35-40% customer, the transaction fails. So we try to educate them upfront on how could a transaction look from a dollar perspective? How could it look from a structure perspective? What are the differences in the types of buyers, right? So we have a company right now we're working on that's a cybersecurity consulting firm. It doesn't make much sense for a low to mid-market private equity fund to buy them as a platform because they're too small. So we need to educate that seller on, here's why we want to go to a fund that owns a company that you can be bolted onto, or a strategic acquirer for your business. So we really try to get ahead of what our process is. And like you said, we're ruthless about the process we've built. It works. We're always iterating it. We're always getting better. But our process is what, fuels this entire engine that we built. And I think it's important to set those expectations with the seller on, hey, we're going to get back to you within 3 weeks from dozens of private equity funds. Next step's going to be introducing you to them. After we introduce you to them, we'll help you, evaluate those conversations and move forward. Then we help you field offers. Then we help you get through the transaction. If you need a lawyer, we know them. If you need a quality of earnings group, we know them. If you need this, we know them. So we try to get ahead of all that. But our initial outreach is usually 2 or 3 lines in an email, a LinkedIn message, a voicemail, just kind of a hook, let's talk, let's see what's on the table. And then we get into the details.
Not only am I the host of the Private Equity Podcast, but I'm also the founder and managing partner of Raw Selection. Raw Selection is a private equity specialist executive search firm with 2 divisions, one that focuses on portfolio, C-suite executive hires, and one that focuses on private equity direct hires of your back office and investment deal professionals, operating across Europe and North America. A unique offering of our service is that we offer a full money-back guarantee on all upfront deposits. We typically take around $10,000 as an upfront deposit to commence the search process. The remainder is then on completion, but that upfront deposit is completely refundable. If you're not happy with our service, we will refund that upfront deposit, no questions asked. You mentioned a little bit about perception of private equity there, that there's a negative, they're just going to strip us apart, which I understand the concept, and I understand the whole private equity world, and when businesses go wrong, they have been sold off and stripped. But I agree, there's no point there's no money in a business being carved up into 1,000 pieces in the most part. How do you overcome some of those? What are the types of objections that you hear against private equity, and how are you overcoming them to position that to owners to open that door to a potential sale to PE?
Yeah, I mean, we overcome it by trying to show them that we're going to get them multiple groups to give them feedback, right? If you get one offer, well, that's all you have nothing to compare that to. If you talk to 2 private equity funds, that's not enough, So I think the preconceived notion of private equity funds going to underpay, they're going to look over my shoulder, they're going to have their thumb on me, they're not going to let me do my job. We work with some really great people in these private equity funds. And I think we've gotten pretty lucky that we enjoy the people at the funds we work with. So we can confidently tell sellers, hey, I think this is the right fund for you because of X, Y, and Z. And I don't think this is the right fund for you because their model doesn't fit your personality. It's about finding the right deal. And we try to educate them on the people behind the fund as much as we try to educate them on what a deal looks like on paper, cut and dry numbers. So, some people have different views on the big bad PE fund, but at the end of the day, a good transaction is going to hurt both sides just a little bit. Not everybody's going to feel like they might have left a little bit on the table. We see that as that's the key, is like, we're 99% of the way there, not 100% of the way there. That's typically a really good deal.
Excellent. And I'm interested, Brian, as a supplier into the industry, what do you love about private equity, and equally, what do you dislike about it?
Yeah, I mean, I dislike the speed. We hand the ball off at the 20-yard line, and we're just sitting there hoping that the kicker's going to make the field goal for a certain portion of this transaction. So that part of it is, there is so much outside of your control, whether you're the middleman like us, the seller, or the buyer, that can send a transaction sideways. That sometimes it's not anybody's fault. It's the market. It's an unforeseen event. We had a fund lose a major client, and it was one of the biggest companies in the world, Bed Bath & Beyond. They went out of business. Nobody thought Bed Bath & Beyond was going to go out of business. So now this seller's sitting there holding the bag because another company that everybody thought was going to be here for the next 100 years went out of business, right? So I think, the uncertainty of this industry is scary, but the reward of finding that seller who, this is probably going to be a one and done for most entrepreneurs. Most people are not going to sell multiple companies. Most people aren't going to sell one company. So if you're lucky enough to go through this, we love to be the ones that help you make the right decision. And it's a really, comforting feeling when we get calls from the buyer and the seller after a transaction closes, thanking us. Like that's a great day for us. So that's the rewarding part of this. And, we do pretty well with these deals. Like everybody can be pretty successful in this world if you do it the right way.
Okay. And what are your influences? What do you read? What do you watch? What do you listen to that you would recommend that others check out?
Yeah. Well, recently somebody that's been incredibly influential on our model and how we operate is a guy, Alex Hormozy, who I'm sure, you've seen, but me and my partner, sometimes we'll be texting each other at, yeah, there you go. Texting each other at midnight going, I swear to God, this guy's got a bug in our office. Like he's talking to us, we appreciate transparency and honesty. And I think he's as, black and white as things get. And the advice is very applicable. So whether you're building a service business or a product business, that $100 million offers, $100 million leads, his podcast, he just did, I don't know when this is going to go live, but recently he just did turning from, a business owner to an investor and what that hat is like. And it's like, we're starting to invest our own money now into deals. And this fits us, like he was, like I said, like he's in our office. So I think that's a great resource, but we talk to so many people. And I think one thing we do really well is we stay in our lane and we know what we know what we don't know. And we're willing to listen to people and learn from people. And we want to be the guys we're working for when we grow up, essentially, right? Like the iteration of Deal Gen is we find all these great deals. Well, we need to start putting our own money into these deals because that's where the real return comes in. And we don't get that without learning and listening to some of the most successful funds in the world that we work with and taking a page out of their playbook.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned him, actually. Something we've done a bit of content on from our YouTube channel. And it's a bit like there's a bit of negativity around him in the private equity industry because he's kind of coming in not as an investor, he's an operator turned investor.
Right.
But his deal flow process is incredible. The amount of options he has and investments that he can make is immense, and I can understand why you certainly would follow him. But he's a bit like, there's a lot to learn from him, and there's a lot to learn on the content he shares and what he puts forward. And this is what I'm encouraging a lot of private equity firms to do. And it's a bit like the reaction I saw when Grant Cardone really started pushing to raise billion AUMs, billion funds for the real estate industry. And a lot of the real estate investors were like, he's a nobody, he's a nothing. And whether you like him or not is immaterial. But the point is what they've achieved by doing that as, non-normal investment bankers turned private equity investors, management consulting, corporate finance guys. They've managed to do that without that track record and background, albeit I think Alex did work for an investment bank actually, but or something like that. But that level of understanding and exposure and what he's doing is really interesting. And I think there's a lot the industry can take on. And then it will be a fight for who shares the most. Whereas at the moment, it's who keeps the most hidden in private equity at times. But there is, some of our clients are doing that. Middle Ground Capital does that really well, sharing content. Blackfoot Capital do it as well. So it's definitely an option for firms to leverage on.
Definitely. And, I think everybody has a motive, right? So like when he starts his podcast off, I'm not selling you anything, blah, blah, blah. Well, we spent a few bucks on his books, so you're selling something. Like everybody, the motive doesn't mean it's negative or it's an ulterior motive. It's just everybody is trying to get something when they put something out in the world. I mean, you're running this podcast. Yeah, it's great content, but I'm sure you get something out of it at the end of the day too, And when we talk to sellers, we want to do right by them, but we don't get paid unless a transaction closes. So we're incented to get that transaction closed. So I think when you see some of these, gurus or whatever you want to call them, you got to just keep in mind that they're not doing this for free. There is a revenue model in there somewhere.
Absolutely. Take what you can from them, learn from it, and implement certainly into your business.
Absolutely.
So, Brian, how does anybody reach out to you and get in touch should they wish to do so?
Yeah. DealGenPartners.com, Brian at DealGenPartners.com. Reach out, email, LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn. A lot of our business is built through the platform. I'm pretty sure that's how we connected. So, LinkedIn, Brian Scanlon, BRIAN, Brian at DealGen Partners. You send me an email, I'll get back to you within a few hours, most likely, if not quicker than that. We communicate better than anybody, I think. I think that's what we do best.
Absolutely. So, well, Brian, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your insight into deal origination, which is a bit of a enigma, unfortunately, in private equity, and certainly a difficult tool for a lot of private equity firms to get right with the level of competition. So thank you very much for sharing everything you have done.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. This was fun.
And as always, thank you very much for everybody who tunes in and listens to the Private Equity Podcast. Should you ever need private equity professionals or portfolio executive hiring, please do reach out to us at Raw Selection. If you've not already done so, please do subscribe and you'll be notified of the next podcast, which comes out every 2 weeks. But till the next time, keep smashing it, and thank you very much for listening.